Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into, well, a bit of a mess, really. The global economy is sending out these completely contradictory signals.
It really is. On one hand, you hear about strength, but then the actions, especially from central banks, they just scream panic.
Exactly. So our mission today is to make sense of it for you. We've synthesized a lot of sources, and honestly, they point towards an instability that's arguably much deeper than what we saw back in 2008.
That's the core problem we want to unpack. We're looking at sort of three main things: the weird paralysis in U.S. monetary policy, the shifts in geopolitical tensions, and this massive flight to hard assets.
Yeah, why are people rushing to gold and silver if everything's fine?
It shows that the usual numbers, the traditional indicators, they just aren't capturing the real panic that seems to be bubbling under the surface.
And maybe the best place to start is with the Federal Reserve. Because, okay, if the U.S. economy is strong, like they say, and they're just data dependent,
Right, that's the official line.
then why on earth are they planning aggressive rate cuts? That feels like the opposite of confidence.
It signals deep stress, maybe even confusion inside the Fed. We're seeing notes about expected cuts, maybe a quarter point in late October, another in December.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, it sounds like chaos.
Uh-huh.
There's this phrase from one source, data dependent, but there is no data.
Wow. Flying blind, basically.
Pretty much. And apparently big arguments, some saying cut by 50 basis points now, others saying don't cut at all. It's messy.
And then there's the really big one, the end of quantitative tightening, QT, starting December 1st. Now, QT is supposed to be the Fed shrinking its balance sheet, right? Pulling money out.
Correct. That was the plan, anyway.
So why is stopping QT now such a huge deal? What does that signal?
Because QT was really the only serious tool they had left to drain all that liquidity pumped in over the years. Stopping it cold turkey like this.
Yeah.
It's a U-turn. It signals a shift towards what some sources are calling massive monetary abundance. Basically, the money taps are being turned back on.
Which sounds good, maybe. Lower rates, more money.
Well, it dramatically increases the risk of massive inflation down the line. You're potentially flooding the system with money again, just as costs globally are already, soaring.
And pouring this monetary abundance onto an already staggering pile of debt. The U.S. national debt is now, what is it, $38 trillion?
$38 trillion. It's hard to even conceptualize.
But it's the speed that's terrifying. It's going up by $1 trillion roughly every 100 days.
Yeah, get this, $1 trillion every 100 days. Let's try to put that in perspective for you.
Okay.
The U.S. holds the world's largest official gold reserves, right? The total value of all that gold is about maybe $1 trillion.
So they're adding debt equal to their entire gold reserves every 3 months or so.
Exactly. And get this, even if you took all the gold circulating in the entire world, its total value still wouldn't be enough to cover that $38 trillion U.S. debt.
That's sobering.
The foundation just looks incredibly shaky.
Yeah. Which is probably why Jean-Claude Trichet, this former head of the European Central Bank, said the situation now is actually worse than the 2008 Lehman crisis.
And we need to understand why he'd say that. It's not just about the numbers, it's the type of crisis.
How so?
Well, 2008 was fundamentally a liquidity crisis, right? The plumbing of the banking system got clogged, and it needed a massive injection of cash to get moving again.
Okay.
What we seem to be facing now is more fundamental. It's structural. It's rooted in the fiat currency system itself, this massive, unsustainable debt load that almost requires devaluation to manage.
So if the whole system depends on just creating more and more debt forever,
then the system itself is compromised, regardless of what, say, the unemployment rate looks like on the surface. The core is unsound.
and we're seeing signs of that instability ripple outwards, aren't we?
Yeah.
Beyond just the Fed and the debt numbers. Look at corporations.
Absolutely. Big companies are bracing for a downturn. You see it in the layoffs, the push for automation.
The numbers are pretty stark. Amazon cutting 30,000 workers immediately.
Yeah. And that's just the start. Their long-term plan, according to some sources, is replacing up to 600,000 jobs with robots by 2033. That's a massive structural shift.
And UPS, too. 34,000 layoffs there. They're like a barometer for trade, aren't they?
A huge barometer. When UPS cuts back that deeply, it signals a real lack of confidence in future economic activity, both domestically and globally. They're betting on automation for cost certainty.
And you see the stress on the consumer side, too. It's not just corporate strategy.
No, it's hitting Main Street. Look
Yeah.
at Chipotle, the fast food chain.
Yeah, what about them?
Their executives basically said that middle and lower income folks in the U.S. just can't afford to eat out much anymore. Even fast food is becoming a luxury.
Wow, if Chipotle seeing that, it means wallets are really squeezed.
It indicates pretty widespread distress, which
Hmm.
makes the stock market look even weirder.
Right. That's the big paradox, isn't it? The S&P 500 hitting record highs. One source mentioned it hitting, what, 6,900 points?
Something like that. Seems completely disconnected from the layoffs and the consumer stress and the debt bomb we just talked about.
But here's the catch. On a recent day when the index hit a high, something like 400 out of the 500 companies in the index actually closed down.
Exactly. The gains are incredibly concentrated. It's not broad strength at all.
Just a few giants pulling everything up.
Precisely. Take Alphabet, Google. Stock price up, say, 73% over 6 months. Huge jump. But their actual revenue and profit up only 1%.
It has a massive disconnect.
It's pure speculation. It's investment capital fleeing other uncertain sectors and piling into a few tech monopolies perceived as safe havens. It's not real growth, it's just foam. Froth.
And speaking of spotting bubbles, what about Warren Buffett?
Ah, yes. Berkshire Hathaway.
His company's sitting on, what, $344 billion in cash? Mostly treasury bonds.
An enormous pile of cash. $344 billion.
But wait, if you're saying massive monetary abundance and inflation are the big risks, isn't holding that much cash, well, risky? Isn't it losing value?
It is losing some value to inflation, yes. But Buffett seems to be making a different bet. He's betting on liquidity and timing.
Meaning,
Yeah, inflation is a drag, but having that $344 billion means he has the firepower, the dry powder, to instantly buy up something like 470 companies in the S&P 500 when or if price is correct.
so he's waiting for the crash.
He's prioritizing the ability to act instantly when assets get cheap again. He's basically signaling he deeply distrusts current market valuations. He wants cash ready for the sale.
That level of caution from arguably the world's most famous investor, that definitely gives you pause.
It should.
Okay, let's widen the lens a bit. How is all this playing out on the global stage? Geopolitical friction, trade wars. How does that feed into this instability?
Well, look at the recent U.S.-China talks.
Yeah.
On the surface, you saw some minor agreements, right? Tariffs tweaked slightly, like
Yeah.
dropping from 57% to 47% on something.
Small changes, really.
Exactly. Superficial. The underlying strategic conflict, it's still there. They're rivals, but they're also deeply intertwined economically. It's a very tense codependency.
And it's not like the U.S. is presenting a totally united front either.
No. You saw Trump try to slap new tariffs on Canada and Brazil, but the U.S. Senate, even Republicans, blocked him. That shows internal friction on trade policy, making things even less predictable for everyone else.
Which probably just encourages more fragmentation globally.
Right.
Countries looking out for themselves.
It definitely accelerates it, especially around controlling key resources. Which brings us, interestingly, to the Monroe Doctrine.
The Monroe Doctrine, that's from, what, the 1820s? Keeping Europe out of the Americas?
Historically, yes, but think about its modern application. It's economic and military now.
Oh, so.
Sources point to the massive U.S. Navy deployment near Venezuela. The official reason is fighting cartels.
So Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves.
And security pacts with Russia. So is it really just about cartels? Or is it about securing oil, pushing back against Russian influence in America's backyard, and shoring up the petrodollar system against challenges from, say, the BRICS nations?
So resource control. Global power plays adding to the economic stress.
Exactly. It's all connected. This constant pressure, the debt, the inflation risk, the geopolitical jostling, it all culminates in this one really clear signal of panic from the financial system itself.
Which is?
Central banks, they are running, practically sprinting away from paper assets.
That's the ultimate sign of distrust, isn't it? When the people who print the money don't seem to want it.
It's incredibly telling. Our sources tallied up 312 interest rate cuts by central banks around the world in just the last 24 months.
312 cuts?
A 25-year record for global monetary easing. It looks like coordinated desperation.
And where are they putting their money instead?
Gold! They are buying gold like never before. 830 tons accumulated in 2025 alone.
Wow.
And historically, central banks used to hold maybe 70% of their reserves in gold. Now it's closer to 25%, so they could, theoretically, triple their current buying if the panic really escalates.
So the institutions are panicked. What about regular people?
Demand for physical metal is surging too. India, for example, during festival season bought 1,000 tons of silver and 50 tons of gold, reportedly in a single day.
1,000 tons of silver.
Huge physical demand. And in places like Shanghai and Bangkok, there are shortages of physical silver. Refineries are apparently only accepting the absolute highest purity bars because demand is so specific.
Which really underlines the difference between owning paper promises like futures contracts and holding the actual metal.
Absolutely. Physical gold and silver are fetching huge premiums over the paper price. People don't trust that the paper claims can actually be delivered. They want the real thing, something tangible.
And even the big banks managing the paper market seem to be pricing in a reckoning. JP Morgan's gold forecast is pretty eye-opening.
It really is. They're forecasting gold at $5,555 an ounce by 2027,
And even higher after that.
$8,000 by 2028. Now think about what that means.
It means they expect gold to become much more valuable.
Not necessarily about gold itself becoming more useful. It's a forecast about massive dollar devaluation. It's saying they expect it will take almost double the number of dollars to buy the same ounce of gold in just a few years.
So, the dollar losing potentially half its purchasing power against gold.
That's the implicit message. It's a tacit admission from a major player that they see significant currency debasement coming.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this for everyone listening. We've got this enormous accelerating debt problem. We've got central banks forced into monetary abundance to try and manage it, risking inflation.
Right. We've got geopolitical tensions, fracturing trade, and resource control.
We see corporations cutting jobs, consumers struggling, and a stock market bubble balanced precariously on just a few tech giants.
And underpinning it all, the clearest signal. Central banks themselves are dumping paper assets and piling into physical gold. It confirms this isn't just a temporary blip like 2008. It feels like a deep structural crisis.
So the key takeaway for you is that the system seems trapped between debt, the devaluation needed to handle it, and these global fractures. The smart money, the central banks, they're voting with their feet.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question for you to think about. If the stock market's strength relies on just a handful of mega-cap tech stocks, and if all the gold in the world isn't even enough to cover the U.S. national debt, what actually backs up the value of anything in the future?
And specifically, how much is the US dollar really worth if the world's most powerful financial institutions seem to be hedging their bets against it?
That's the question to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. We hope this deep dive has helped you connect some of those dots. Thanks for joining us.